my family's going to go away because of my behaviors that I brought home from the road. I got kicked out of the house by my wife. I was living on my own somewhere, and I did not want that.
James Hetfield built a legend on volume, control, and survival, standing as Metallica's iron spine while projecting calm beyond the stage.
James got emotional on stage during a Metallica performance, stating he was feeling a little bit insecure while his band members embraced him. Seemed like he was going through a lot at the time.
For years, his marriage seemed to prove that balance was possible amid fame, rehab, and endless tours. Then the divorce landed, and the quiet cracked open. His former wife stepped forward, not with noise, but with details that reframed everything fans thought they knew. So, what was hidden behind the riffs and restraint? Stay with us as we unravel what drove her to speak out, finally. When silence became the loudest exposure. The confirmation did not come through a television appearance or a personal interview. It came through a statement issued by her lawyer. In a few carefully chosen lines, Francesca Hetfield confirmed that her marriage to James Hetfield had come to an end. There were no allegations, no explanations, and no private details made public. The marriage was over, and that fact alone was allowed to stand. According to the statement, Francesca emphasized respect. She acknowledged the long history she and James shared and the family they built together. She did not assign fault or single out any specific cause for the separation. At the same time, she made it clear that their paths had diverged and that continuing the marriage was no longer possible. The message was calm, restrained, and definitive. That restraint immediately shaped how the divorce was received. For years, the public narrative around James Hetfield had centered on his personal struggles, his battles with addiction, his time in rehab, and the strain those experiences placed on his life had been openly discussed in documentaries and interviews. Francesca, by contrast, had remained largely private throughout those years. Her decision to speak only once, and to do so without blame, stood out sharply against the level of scrutiny surrounding the breakup. Fans reacted quickly. Many expressed sadness at the end of a marriage that had lasted for decades and had often been viewed as a rare example of stability in the world of rock music. Others focused on the tone of Francesca's statement itself. Online discussions described it as graceful and dignified. There was widespread admiration for the way she handled the situation, particularly her decision to avoid public conflict and to protect her family's privacy. What drew the most attention was not what the statement revealed, but what it did not include. There were no references to specific incidents, no recounting of past struggles, and no attempt to reshape James Hetfield's public image. By limiting the message to confirmation and acknowledgement, Francesca avoided escalating the situation into a public dispute. That choice prompted many fans to reassess the years leading up to the divorce without being directed toward a single narrative. The documents note that this reaction was significant. Francesca's silence on details led people to view the divorce as the result of long-standing issues rather than a sudden breaking point. Her words suggested closure rather than conflict. Without saying so directly, the statement conveyed that the decision had been carefully considered and was final. Public sympathy followed, particularly toward Francesca. Many recognized the difficulty of ending such a long marriage under intense public attention. Her approach was widely described as measured and respectful, and her refusal to engage in blame was seen as an effort to shield not only herself, but also her children from unnecessary scrutiny. The focus remained on the family rather than on speculation. The response also marked a shift in how the story was discussed. Instead of centering entirely on James Hetfield's personal struggles, Attention widened to include the reality of the marriage itself and the emotional demands it may have carried over time. This shift did not come from new information, but from the tone and structure of the statement alone. By confirming the divorce in this manner, Francesca set the foundation for everything that followed. The marriage was acknowledged with respect. Its end was stated without hostility, and the absence of detail ensured that the discussion would move forward without a public confrontation. That single restrained statement became the point where private endurance met public awareness, anchoring the story that unfolds next. Stay with us as we uncover more. Forged between noise and need. The early years arrived under pressure, not promise. In 1992, Metallica was no longer just a band climbing upward. The self-titled Black Album had already changed their scale, their reach, and the expectations placed on James Hetfield. Stadiums replaced clubs. Noise replaced stillness. And success, instead of bringing clarity, magnified everything James had never settled inside himself. Long before fame, instability had already shaped him. Born in Downey, California in 1963, James grew up in a household marked by strict belief and emotional distance. His parents' divorce when he was 13 fractured his sense of permanence early. Then came a deeper rupture. His mother's death in 1980, after refusing medical treatment, left him at 16 with grief he never learned to soften. Loss became something he carried forward rather than moved past. Music stepped into that space. Piano lessons at 9 gave him structure. Drums offered rhythm and release. The guitar, discovered at 14, became his language. By the time he was playing in early bands like Leather Charm and Obsession, music was no longer about expression alone. It was containment, control. A place where effort produced results, even when life did not. Metallica grew out of that mindset. Discipline, intensity, and relentless drive pushed the band forward, and James thrived inside it. But outside the music, the same traits created distance. Fame accelerated everything. The attention was constant. The environment was crowded with people, yet empty of grounding. Excess surrounded him, but nothing slowed him down. It was in that unsettled space that Francesca Tomasi entered his life. She did not approach him through the chaos orbiting a rising rock star. She did not chase the image or the access that came with it. What separated her immediately was her distance from the spectacle. She met James without the expectations attached to his name. That absence of pressure mattered more than attraction. Their connection formed quietly. It was not shaped by grand gestures or public moments. It grew in private spaces, through conversation and routine. For James, who had learned early that people could leave without warning, consistency mattered more than intensity. Francesca did not offer escape from his career. She offered steadiness alongside it. The timing mattered. James was carrying unresolved fears shaped by childhood loss, while his professional life demanded constant expansion. Francesca represented something rare in that moment. Not excitement, but grounding. Not amplification, but balance. And in a world that rewarded excess, that difference stood out sharply. But could steadiness survive the pressure of fame and the weight of old wounds? Keep watching to see how their story unfolds. The struggle after marriage. By the time James and Francesca married in 1997, the choice reflected intention rather than momentum. Metallica's success had not slowed, but the marriage was never positioned as part of that rise. It existed separately from it. Privacy was not accidental. It was protected. That separation became clearer as they began building a family. With the births of Callie, Castor, and Marcella, decisions were made deliberately. Their children would not grow up inside the machinery of fame. Home would not be an extension of touring schedules or album cycles. Normalcy would be preserved, even if it required distance from the spotlight. Life did not become simple. Metallica's demands continued to pull James away for long stretches. Recording sessions, tours, and performances remained relentless. Francesca carried much of the responsibility during those absences, maintaining continuity while James lived between cities and stages. That imbalance was part of the arrangement, not a misunderstanding. What Francesca provided during those years went beyond logistics. She created structure where James's life had often lacked it. Routine mattered. Boundaries mattered. Family life followed its own rhythm, separate from the volatility of the music world. That structure gave James something solid to return to, even when the pressures of fame intensified. As Metallica continued to evolve creatively, subtle changes emerged in James's writing. The aggression that defined earlier years remained, but it began sharing space with reflection. The music did not soften, but it deepened. Those shifts unfolded alongside a home life that allowed complexity rather than collapse. The balance was imperfect, but it held. Their decision to raise the family away from constant public exposure reinforced that balance. Daily life revolved around school schedules, private routines, and moments untouched by the industry. This separation was not about rejecting success. It was about containing it. Fame existed outside the home. Inside, predictability mattered. None of this erased the weight James carried. The losses from his youth, combined with the pressures of sustaining one of the world's biggest metal bands, remained present. Music continued to serve as release, but it no longer stood alone. Francesca's presence helped create a framework where intensity did not spill into every corner of life. The marriage during these years was not defined by spectacle or idealism. It was defined by effort, by boundaries, by the belief that stability could exist alongside chaos if it was guarded carefully. In an industry known for collapse, their relationship remained quiet, controlled, and deliberately ordinary. As Metallica's reach expanded and James's internal struggles continued to surface beneath the surface of success, the early promise they built around privacy and normalcy remained the reference point. It was the structure everything else leaned against, even as the weight pressing on it continued to grow. But what happens when James Hetfield's carefully built structure begins to crack? Are you ready to see where it all started? Stay with us. James Hetfield and the battle that forged Metallica. James Hetfield and the battle that built Metallica didn't begin with sold-out arenas or Hall of Fame speeches. It began in restless rooms, loud arguments, burned fingers, and a stubborn refusal to quit. Long before the name Metallica carried weight, it was fragile, unsettled, and still arguing with itself about what it wanted to be. The sound hadn't settled. The roles weren't fixed. Even the voice at the center of it all wasn't fully formed yet. At one point, the band flirted with the idea of not letting Hetfield sing at all. British metal records spun endlessly, Diamond Head especially, shaping the sharp edges of his guitar style, while doubts lingered about whether his voice fit the vision. There were conversations about adding another guitarist. Even names like John Rhodes floated through the room. Someone else, John Bush from Armored Saint, was considered as a possible frontman. None of it stuck. What eventually stuck wasn't a perfect plan, but a lineup that survived friction long enough to become real. The early version of Metallica came together with Hetfield on rhythm guitar and vocals, Lars Ulrich behind the drums, Dave Mustaine tearing through lead guitar parts, and Ron McGovney holding down the bass. That version didn't last. The sound felt thin, unsettled, until Cliff Burton stepped in and quietly shifted everything. His arrival wasn't loud, but the change was immediate. The music grew heavier, wider, more dangerous, and suddenly the band sounded like it knew where it was going, even if the people inside it didn't always get along. Back then, Hetfield called what they were playing power metal. Labels didn't matter much until they did. By 1984, a journalist named Malcolm Dome used the phrase thrash metal while writing about Anthrax, and the word spread fast. Metallica found themselves wearing a name that fit them better than they expected, becoming one of the bands that defined it rather than followed it. But while the music sharpened, tensions inside the group grew louder. Between 1982 and 1983, Dave Mustaine's drinking and behavior pushed the band to a breaking point. Small incidents turned ugly. One moment, beer was poured onto McGovney's bass. Another moment, patience ran out. On April 1st, 1983, Kirk Hammett from Exodus was brought in quietly. 10 days later, Mustaine was gone, sent back to Los Angeles by bus after rehearsals in New York. That ending didn't slow him down for long. Soon after, he formed Megadeth, turning anger into fuel and carving his own place in metal history. Years later, people would argue endlessly about guitars and credit. But inside Metallica, Hetfield remained the anchor. His role stretched far beyond rhythm parts. He shaped lyrics, built vocal melodies, and worked closely with Ulrich to piece together album structures. Even when Kirk Hammett began recording rhythm guitar parts after the Load era, Hetfield's fingerprints stayed everywhere, including unexpected guitar solos on tracks like Nothing Else Matters and My Friend of Misery. The physical cost of that intensity showed itself in strange ways. Hetfield loved skateboarding, loved it enough to keep doing it on tour, even as injuries stacked up. Broken arms meant canceled parts, altered shows, and constant adjustments. Eventually, management stepped in with a clause banning skateboarding during tours. For someone wired on movement and adrenaline, it felt like punishment. But it was survival disguised as control. Survival became literal in August 1992 at Olympic Stadium in Montreal. During a joint tour with Guns N' Roses, a pyrotechnic explosion during Fade to Black went off too soon. Hetfield was caught in it. His guitar shielded him from worse damage, but burns covered his left side, hand, arm, face, and his eyebrows and hair were singed away. Second- and third-degree burns followed, along with silence. 17 days later, he was back on stage. For weeks after, John Marshall stepped in on guitar while Hetfield healed, the band refusing to stop moving even when their frontman couldn't fully play. There were quieter battles too. During one live performance, Hetfield lost control of his voice while singing a cover song. It scared him enough to finally seek vocal training. The solution was simple: warm-ups at a piano, exercises recorded onto a tape. He kept that tape for years, using it before shows and recordings, trusting routine more than bravado. That vulnerability, rare for someone seen as unbreakable, later surfaced openly in Metallica, some kind of monster. By 2001, while working on Saint Anger, the cracks widened. Alcohol stopped being a private issue and became impossible to ignore. Hetfield entered rehab for 7 months, then stepped away with his family for 4 more. The band hovered in uncertainty. Tensions flared. Jason Newsted left. Cameras captured moments no band ever plans to show the world. Silences, anger, doubt, and the fear that Metallica might not survive itself. When Hetfield returned, Change followed. Robert Trujillo joined on bass, bringing a different energy shaped by years with Ozzy Osbourne. The circle turned again as Newsted eventually filled Trujillo's former role elsewhere. With the lineup reset, Metallica pushed forward, releasing Death Magnetic on September 12, 2008. The album shot to #1 on the Billboard charts and topped charts in more than 30 countries, proving that momentum hadn't vanished. It had been waiting. On April 4, 2009, the band stood together again, this time at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Hetfield, Ulrich, Hammett, Trujillo, and Newsted shared the moment. Cliff Burton was honored through his father. Songs like Master of Puppets and Enter Sandman filled the room. Some names from the earliest days weren't included. Reminders that Metallica's story has always been shaped as much by absence as presence. And through it all, the battle never really ended. It just changed shape, shifting from rehearsal rooms to hospital beds, from backstage arguments to quiet recovery rooms, from doubt about a voice to the discipline needed to protect it. But while the world celebrated James Hetfield, what struggle followed him home? Let's find out. James Hetfield and the quiet war at home. James Hetfield was fighting a silent war long before it became visible to the world. A private struggle that lived behind sold-out shows and roaring crowds. Alcohol had followed him since his teenage years, slowly turning from relief into refuge, then into something darker. It helped him escape pressure, noise, and old wounds that never fully healed. But inside his home, the cost of that escape was felt every day, especially by Francesca, who lived beside the storm rather than outside it. At times, recovery looked hopeful. Rehab stints came and went, each one demanding strength not just from James, but from Francesca too. She became more than a partner. She became a steady hand, a buffer between relapse and responsibility. Supporting someone through addiction is not loud or dramatic. It's exhausting, repetitive, and lonely. Francesca learned to live with uncertainty, knowing that progress could disappear overnight. Yet alcohol wasn't the only shadow moving through the house. Anxiety followed James everywhere, creeping in before performances and settling in after them. There were days when confidence vanished without warning, replaced by self-doubt so heavy it created distance between him and the people he loved most. Emotional withdrawal became another quiet enemy, stretching conversations thin and turning presence into absence even when he was physically home. Metallica's schedule didn't pause for healing. Tours pulled James away for months at a time, cities blurring together while Francesca stayed behind, anchoring the family. Parenting fell largely on her shoulders. Daily routines, school issues, emotional care. She carried them alone while the band moved from one country to another. Her own goals slowly faded into the background, pushed aside by survival and stability. In the early 2000s, when James entered rehab again during the work on St. Anger, the strain reached a breaking point. He stepped away for months, first for treatment, then to reconnect with family. The pause was necessary, but it also exposed how fragile everything had become. Counseling followed, individual sessions, shared conversations, efforts to untangle years of unspoken fears and unresolved pain. Therapy wasn't a cure, but it was a space where truths finally had room to exist. Inside their home, life became a careful balancing act. Francesca learned to protect the children from uncertainty while managing her own exhaustion. James tried to rebuild trust while still learning how to sit with discomfort without running from it. Love remained, but it carried weight now, shaped by vigilance and emotional labor. This was not the kind of battle played out on stage or captured in headlines. It unfolded quietly, in ordinary rooms, during long nights and tense silences, where recovery was measured not in applause, but in small, fragile moments of stability that could shift without warning. But what happens when quiet survival turns into distance? Stay with us. When distance changed everything. The unraveling began quietly in 2016, when James Hetfield and Francesca made a decision that seemed practical. They left the familiar rhythm of the San Francisco Bay Area and settled in Colorado. Open land, slower days, and the promise of a more grounded family life offered calm. Yet distance doesn't always heal. Sometimes it exposes what's been carefully held together. Colorado reshaped the family's balance. Francesca, who had built her life and routines in California, suddenly found herself starting over. James tried to embrace the quiet while still answering the relentless pull of Metallica. The space between their realities widened. What felt peaceful at first began to feel isolating, especially as tours and recording schedules resumed. Subtle changes became visible on stage. Fans noticed before words were spoken. James's posture shifted. His voice sometimes carried hesitation instead of force. The confidence that once felt automatic seemed fragile. Despite years of sobriety and therapy, his inner battles resurfaced in quieter, more confusing ways. By 2019, those struggles could no longer be managed privately. James made the difficult choice to return to rehab, forcing Metallica to cancel their tour of Australia and New Zealand. For fans, the announcement was shocking. For Francesca, it was familiar, heavy, and exhausting. She had long been the steady center, balancing marriage, motherhood, and emotional support, while absorbing the impact of James's anxiety and uncertainty. This time, the weight lingered. At home, moods shifted without warning. Some days, James withdrew, distant and silent. Other days, tension filled the space. Francesca carried the emotional load even when depleted. The effort to maintain stability for their children, appearances, and hope became harder to sustain. Counseling followed, together and separately. They tried new ways to reconnect, to understand what had changed and whether it could be repaired. Outside, distance became visible. At public events, the warmth that once defined them felt muted. Friends whispered. Speculation spread. Some blamed recovery. Others believed time had done the damage, slowly pulling them in different directions after decades together. In January 2020, James made his first public appearance after rehab at the Peterson Automotive Museum. He looked calmer, healthier, and focused. Yet details about his personal life remained guarded. Behind the scenes, the marriage was already shifting into something unrecognizable. By 2022, the change became official. James filed for divorce, surprising fans who had long seen them as a stable couple in the world of rock. Francesca's response was measured. Through her lawyer, she spoke of love, family, and respect, avoiding blame or private details. Her grace resonated, earning admiration from those who understood how much had been carried in silence. Their children, Callie, Castor, and Marcella, were already adults when the news became public. Castor, following his own musical path as a drummer in Savannah, Georgia, quietly continued forward, separate from the storm surrounding his parents' history. The family adjusted under public scrutiny, each finding space to breathe while the world watched. What unfolded was not a sudden collapse, but a long, slow shift shaped by geography, recovery, emotional fatigue, and the realization that some bonds, no matter how deeply rooted, can change beyond recognition. So when the marriage faded, where did James Hetfield turn to hold himself together? Keep watching to find out. The man away from the stage. James Hetfield's life has never been limited to loud amplifiers and packed stadiums. Away from the stage, he searches for quieter spaces, places where his hands, not his voice, can speak. When the noise fades, Hetfield turns to routines that keep him steady. He hunts, farms, tends to bees, and spends long hours in his workshop rebuilding cars and motorcycles. These are not hobbies for show. They are private rituals, ways to remain grounded. Working with engines gives him control, patience, and purpose, the same focus that shapes his riffs. One of his most famous cars, a 1968 Chevrolet Camaro, appeared in the I Disappear music video and later became a symbol of giving back when he sold it and donated the proceeds to a school music program. Another prized creation, a 1936 Auburn boat-tail speedster called Slow Burn, earned him the Good Guys West Coast Custom of the Year award in 2010, showing his commitment to craftsmanship. Sports also pull him into the moment. He follows the Las Vegas Raiders, the San Francisco Giants, and the San Jose Sharks, enjoying competition without being the center of attention. Hot rod shows, outdoor time, and mechanical work offer relief from a life shaped by constant scrutiny. His tattoos tell the story of survival, belief, and identity. Flames, playing cards, crosses, razor blades, and numbers etched into his skin mark moments of life, death, faith, and sobriety. Before fame reshaped everything, Hetfield's connection to music was innocent. His first record purchase, Sweet Home Alabama by Lynyrd Skynyrd, opened a door that would never close. Even as Metallica's popularity soared, he avoided political alignment, insisting music should offer freedom, not direction. In 2007, at Live Earth in London, he performed without endorsing the event's political messages, reflecting his philosophy. Once music is released, it belongs to the listener. That view extended to moments of controversy. When Metallica's music was reportedly used by the U.S. military in 2008, Hetfield accepted it quietly. By 2017, he maintained the same stance. Creators relinquish control once their art enters the world. Beneath this calm, structured life existed another reality. A fear Hetfield admitted openly, losing his family. More than fame or failure, that fear haunted him. The bottom he never wanted to reach. The moment the life he built outside music could collapse because of behaviors carried home from the road. So how did James Hetfield turn private fear into public power? Let's find out. Breaking the silence behind the legacy. James Hetfield's public legacy is built on sound, strength, and endurance. As Metallica's co-founder, rhythm guitarist, lead vocalist, and primary songwriter, he helped shape heavy metal from a garage-born idea in October 1981 into a global force. His partnership with Lars Ulrich created a foundation that held for decades. His guitar style, tight, aggressive, precise, redefined rhythm playing as the driving force rather than background support. His voice, rough and unmistakable, carried pain, rebellion, and survival into every lyric. Rankings followed. In 2009, Joel McIver placed him 8th among the greatest metal guitarists. Hit Parader listed him among the top metal vocalists. Guitar World ranked him 19th overall and named him, alongside Kirk Hammett, one of the strongest metal guitar duos. Rolling Stone later recognized both men for cultural impact, not just technical skill. Awards stacked up, albums multiplied, and Metallica's catalog grew into millions of records sold. While the world focused on his legacy, something quieter shifted behind the scenes. The strength Hetfield showed on stage didn't always translate at home. Over time, personal struggles, long managed, sometimes buried, strained the balance he worked to protect. He had always written about inner battles, addiction, and growth, but living those themes day after day took a deeper toll. When Francesca Hetfield finally broke her silence, the world paused. Her statement, released through her attorney, was calm and deliberate. It confirmed what many suspected, but few understood. Without sharing details or assigning blame, she spoke of love, respect, and the family they built. She acknowledged happiness they once shared, while making clear their paths had separated irreversibly. Fans responded with grief and admiration. For years, James and Francesca had represented stability in a world known for collapse. Her choice to protect privacy, especially for their children, Callie, Castor, and Marcella, now young adults, earned wide respect. The silence was not cold, it was careful. James's own words echoed in the background. The fear of losing his family had always been there. It was the thing that scared him most, more than charts or relevance. Family was the line he never wanted to cross. Yet, life beyond the noise is rarely simple. Hetfield continued to focus on recovery, purpose, and creation. His music moved forward. His hands still worked metal and machines. His beliefs remained steady. Stay true, stay grounded, let music be free. The legacy people discuss is often measured in albums, awards, and influence. But the quieter legacy lives in choices made off-stage, in silence and in restraint, and in spaces where applause cannot reach. As the echoes of fame fade and the personal cost becomes clearer, the story shifts away from victory laps toward something more human, where meaning is no longer defined by volume, but by what remains when everything else grows quiet. So, what do you think James Hetfield's divorce reveals about the real cost of fame behind his legacy? We'd like to hear your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe.